Parenting can feel like a pressure cooker, especially when your child is struggling and you don't know how to help.
It really is about parents actually working on themselves. How do you regulate as a parent to therefore be a model and be in a place of being able to co-regulate your children?
Welcome to Parenting Great Kids. Here's your host, Dr. Meg Meeker.
Welcome, Kahlila and Sarah. Thanks for joining me on the show today. You have a brand new workbook. So tell us about the workbook.
Yeah, so Sarah and I have worked with kids and families for years and years and have worked with hundreds of kids and families at this point. And we found that we could not find a go-to source that we felt really good about that really reflected our kind of values as therapists, what we found has been most helpful for parents and families. So we decided to put together our own resource. It's called the Self-Regulation Workbook for Children ages 5 through 8. It's published through Ulysses Press, and it contains all of the useful concepts, strategies, tips that we've used both in our own families and with the families that we've worked with through the years. And it really, the title of the book is not misleading, but it really is about parents actually working on themselves. How do you regulate as a parent to therefore be a model and be in a place of being able to co-regulate your children? So although it's titled for children, it's actually meant to address a lot of parents and the struggles that parents have. Mm-hmm. And it's fun. It's actually there's a lot of activities in there that you can do with your child. And there's a couple of activities in there for kids to be able to do themselves to learn more about their own emotions.
I'm so glad that you did that because the title is a little bit misleading because I was imagining with their pencils. That's going to be a little hard. But you're absolutely right. If ever I see a child who has anxiety or depression or so forth, I always like to talk to the parents and see what's going on at home because it's never in isolation. Kids' difficulties are never in isolation. You talk about emotional contagion in families. The kids often mirror our emotions. And so when we're stressed, they feel it too. What are some simple ways that parents can stay calm in a moment when kids are melting down or having temper tantrums, or there's just chaos around? What do you say to parents who are having a hard time staying calm in the moment?
Yeah. I actually have a really good example of this morning that kind of feeds into this question, and I can give some strategies for parents. I'll share some. So this morning was a doozy of a morning. It was totally unexpected obstacles, left the house late. We're here in New York City. The subway system was kind of shut down by the time we got to the train. I was kind of stuck with my daughter, not sure how I'd actually get her to school. The no taxis were coming. The Uberers were exorbitantly priced. And I had to do a lot of coaching, internal coaching for myself. So I have some go-to phrases for myself when things like that happen. One of them is life happens, right? I try to shift the expectation that I put on myself or my child. So of course I wanted to get her to school on time, but I said to myself, it's okay if we're a few minutes late, like we can deal with that. 99% of the time she's there on time. Today is an exception. That's okay. Right. So shifting the expectation a bit and accepting the new reality and being okay with that, coaching yourself through that in your own mind can be helpful. So I did a lot of that this morning, and then I was able to problem solve and kind of talk out loud and narrate for my daughter, like, how are we going to do this? What are we going to do? Eventually, we figured out a solution that worked pretty well. And then we were on our way to school, almost there. And I noticed that she was just talking and making all these observations and chatting. And I was like, wow, she's really talking my ear off. What's going on? And I dropped her off. Afterwards, I realized she didn't actually absorb the stress that I was under. She didn't really pick it up. She was kind of in her own world. She could focus on herself and her observations and do it. And I have, in contrast, noticed other times where I'm really, really stressed out. I'm not really containing it that well. she's more quiet. She's like silent, right? She's more quiet. It's like she doesn't have the space to kind of focus on her own stuff. She's maybe focusing on me, or, doesn't want to get in the line of fire, kind of a thing. So I thought that was really interesting to see her just talking up a storm, even though it was a pretty stressful experience.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it really reminds me of the research. If we're thinking, Kahlila talking about an everyday moment, we all have these: getting up, getting ourselves out the door to work, and kids to school. But when you look at the research about trauma, actually, if children are with their parents and their parents are managing their emotions, even if they're stressed and it's hectic, even really big thing. We had 9/11 here in New York at one time. Kids aren't that traumatized. They're actually under the umbrella of their parents, and they're watching their parents to see how their reaction, and the kids can move on when the parents are able. So there is no contagion, right? Sometimes it is going to happen. You're in these situations, and kids can learn how to manage stress. I loved Kahlila's phrase. I have my own. Oh, well. Oh, well.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
yeah. And that helps me kind of let go and not get myself ramped up, with my kids watching.
I think it, points to a sense that probably the three of us live with, and I know a lot of moms out there live with, is that every day we need to, make everything okay and get there on time and make sure we have this done and make sure we have that done. We live with this sort of internal drive, sort of. I think of it as being sort of on the train, and the train gets faster and faster, and just sort of say, it's okay if the train slows down or we fall off. It's going to be okay.
Right.
Because it is going to be okay. But there's something that drives us internally, I think, to make sure we get our child to school on time every single day of the school year. Well, that's just not very realistic.
Right.
Now, a lot of times parents, if they're mothers who are listening, and they think, well, it's great, but I live with a lot of internal conflict. My job is very stressful. My husband's really stressed. And I'm living with a lot of stress. If a parent is constantly sort of on edge or anxious or angry, or kind of a control freak, what effect does that have on the child? And does it matter? Does the age of the child matter?
I think even a newborn can pick up on a very anxious parent. Kids have different capacities at different ages. And of course, in the workbook, we're talking about just 5 to 8. But yeah, I think it does. I think it makes a child anxious. It's always sort of the opposite of what I was saying. If you have this umbrella of confident, calm, then it's, but if everybody's frantic around you, kids, they look to their parents. Kahlila and I have different images that we like to think about for parents can sort of model, which I like to think of a flagpole. You're the flagpole, the child's the flag. If you have 2 flags going in the wind.
Yeah, that's a great image. It's a great image because the flagpole is really just standing upright and pretty steady. And I think, that's wonderful. Now, a lot of it, we hear about the amount of anxiety on the rise in kids and depression, particularly post-COVID. Can you talk about that a little bit and why you think that's happening in young children?
Our world got turned upside down. Our routines went out the window. The structure that we had was no longer existed. There was so much uncertainty in the air for so long amongst most of us, right? No one really knew what was going to happen. It was dangerous. It was scary. So some of the kind of worst feelings you can feel kind of all kind of rolling together. When it happens at the adult level and the adults are stressed and in an uncertain place, it can certainly trickle down. And kids need the routine and the structure and the predictability to feel safe and well-regulated themselves, right? That really helps kids to be able to know what to expect, right? Because there's so much kind of that's unknown to them in kind of a developing mind and growing up. So to have a sense of what to expect is a really helpful thing to feel inside. And when that is kind of thrown all away, it can certainly build anxiety, and no one had real answers for a really long time, right? No one could provide real reassurance for a really long time. That also helps. It's all going to be okay, or we know by this date we'll be back to normal. Like, we had no idea. So we had a real shift in routines, routines and structure, and also just kind of assurance of what life was going to feel like. So I think that had a tremendous amount to do with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. And I think that a lot of kids, well, you tell me if this is true, kind of one of the things I saw, kids heard so much about illness and death and even on television. And maybe they didn't worry about their own death, but the death of their parents. Or what if my mom gets sick? What if my dad gets sick? And I saw a little bit of angst around that. And I think that can certainly have contributed to the anxiety. Talk about self-regulation. And we hear a lot about that. Kids just don't have the regulation of their emotions. They're younger. How does a child develop emotional self-regulation?
So the main way they develop it is through co-regulation. That's how they learn, right? So like you're talking about a newborn, Sarah, our first experiences of being kind of soothed and calmed and shifting from a state of discomfort to comfort comes from outside of us, is through the process of co-regulation. We can coach them through things. We can support them in figuring things out. Kids can learn some skills.
Yeah. And I think the parents, as Kahlila was saying, they're really reinforcing, right? Your child has a big fit and then they calm down. Then the parent looks happy. And the parents consciously and unconsciously reinforcing just, the child's steps that they're taking for themselves. Because, right, with a baby, and and bounce them. But when you have a 7-year-old, you can do some of that, but they're also going to be starting to look within themselves to manage their emotions.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I think it can be hard for many parents of, say, a 7 or 9 or 10-year-old, and they've got multiple kids, and there's a lot of stress at home, and the child starts to act up, and they, disobeying or whatever you want to call it. Parent asks them to do something, and they say no, and the parent starts to get angry and angrier. How does a parent sort of keep things from escalating? And is it important?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things to keep in mind is sometimes you'll be able to de-escalate and sometimes you won't. And the times that you really lose yourself as a parent, just know that they happen to everyone. They happen to the best of us. They happen to child therapists, themselves. And that you have to consider that that's a part of a normal, healthy relationship and that you repair afterwards. So that's something to hold in mind. Mm-hmm. What we recommend for when you're escalating is to really try to pay attention to what you're feeling in the moment where possible, right? So it's about self-monitoring, and you want to start to pay attention to your internal dialogue, like, oh, I'm getting frustrated, I'm getting angry with my kid, I'm getting angry with myself. You're going to start to pay attention to your bodily reactions. Oh, I'm slamming the can on the counter. I'm really getting heated, right?
Yeah.
You really want to be able to pay attention to it, because if you can catch yourself as you're escalating, that's when you're going to have the best opportunity to say, okay, wait a minute. This is a time where I think I need to try some de-escalation strategies, right? So main thing is see if you can observe yourself as you're escalating, right? And if you have a 7 or 8 or 10-year-old, when you're escalating by then, right?
Oh yeah.
You know what your cues are, right? And then you're going to say to yourself, you can coach yourself. You can say, okay, this is a hard moment. You could do some self-talk. This is a tough moment. I know I can get through this. You can use some physical regulation strategies. You can, one of Sarah's tips is to put your head in the freezer for, a good 30 seconds just to get a sensory shock to your system. Like when you do something sensory based, it helps you stop thinking about what you're thinking about and just focus on the sensory experience. So that's what you can trade off if you have a partner in the home. Hey, I'm freaking out right now. I need to just trade off with you. Would you step in? Right. So you can do that. Anything else come to mind for you, Sarah, if you're getting heated?
I guess I think I really love what you're saying. Like every person, just like every child, is different in terms of what calms them down. My mom was she would read her book and plug her ears. Actually, she would play her accordion. Actually, we were four children. It was very chaotic in our house. We had lots of friends over. But what I think is really important, what Kahlila is saying, is it's on yourself. Right, your child's going crazy. It reminds me, I have two dogs, and one of them loves to bark at me for attention. So she's barking at me, and I feel like saying, "Stop barking."
Right.
Again,
You're driving me crazy. Yeah.
loudly. You're driving me crazy. So I'm starting to focus on her. And then she's thinking, oh, great, I'm getting all this attention for barking. Kids are the same, right? If your kid is escalating and you start going in and focusing on them, hey, stop that, blah, blah, blah. That's not going to help, right? Or not help very much. Maybe a quick word. But what Kalila's saying, take it back to yourself. Think, can you stay calm? Can you figure out a way to kind of exit the intensity of this escalation?
Yeah.
And, that's going to be a lot more effective. The calm, then you can think to yourself, what you might want to do then, what you might want to do later.
Yeah. One more thing I will add, if you really feel on the edge of lashing out on your kid, in terms of yelling, right? Or whatever, the best strategy is to do nothing. Just really to do nothing.
Oh, so you mean, so if you're going to yell, just allow yourself to yell or just to walk away? When you say do nothing, what do you mean?
You can stay where you are. You don't necessarily have to walk away. If walking away works and is practical to do, sure, that can help. Meaning, don't say anything.
Okay. Yeah.
You don't have to move your body, but like if if you can stay calm, that's the best way to de-escalate the situation. So again, if you're feeling like, wow, I'm seeing red, I'm about to lose it, and you can't walk away, you can say to yourself, okay, the best thing for me to do is actually just to
Say nothing.
say nothing and do nothing.
I'd like to do the dishes then. Well, that helps me say nothing.
Yeah.
Something physical helps me to stay calm, because agreed, that is one of the very best strategies, not responding.
And the freezer trick. I love it. I love it. In Michigan, northern Michigan, all we have to do in the wintertime is just open the door and stick our head in the snow.
It can be very helpful.
It's interesting because kids have so many different so many different personalities. We have 4 kids and grandkids, and they're just so different. I mean, and some are hard. I mean, they know exactly how to get under your skin. And then these other delightful ones are just hugging you, and they're just sweet, and they always want you to read them a book. And so I find myself, you're reacting very differently to the kids. And then sometimes to the kids that are tougher, you feel like all you do is say no, 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 no. And then the other ones, you feel like you really need to say no. So talk about, are those kids that you say no to all the time, do they end up, getting damaged? Or because a lot of parents will say, how do I know if I'm messing up my kid or not, particularly if they're a hard kid to live with? What do you say to parents who say, am I messing my kid up because I'm always saying no because they're so hard?
I would suggest a couple of things, but one of them would be have a conversation with your kid about it. Be like, yeah, I noticed myself saying no to you a lot. What's that like for you? Hey, I realize like sometimes I can be tough with rules when it comes to us. And, I remember when my mom was like that with me, and it was really hard for me. What about for you? Right. Like, so you can ask them about how it's going and what the experience is like is one idea. For kids, what we talk about in our workbook, our main discipline strategy is connecting with your kids. So when you have a nice well of connection, you're playing with your kid a lot of it, if you can, a little bit, every day if you can, even just 5 minutes, but as much as you can. And you're being affectionate and warm, and you're having really beautiful moments of connection with them. That really helps them to want to stay in that good feeling with you. And so when there's some tense moment or there's some directive you have to give, they're naturally more motivated to be agreeable and to do it for a lot of kids. So connect with those kids that are being more difficult. Spend a lot more time with them. Even at bedtime is a great time to do it, right? 5 minutes at the end of the night and just, hey, I haven't heard much about how you were doing today. Let's talk, or you share a story about your life, right? So connecting with the kids that might be more, and putting in quotes, difficult is a hugely important strategy to use.
Yep.
Yeah, I think you could even include them in chores. Hey, can you help me fold the laundry? Or, just in a playful way, because some kids are very, very challenging to parent. One of the sections I love of our book is the different ways to say no. Yes, tomorrow you can do that. That's one of my favorites. So in different ways, so you're not so, it's not, it's like a warmer relationship. Like, I'm hearing what you're saying and I really want to say yes. However, it's so late right now. So just trying to think about these different ways that the language and the communication, think about your own boss at work and how do they tell you things or say no? And how can you maybe bring in some of those things that feel good to you, to your own family relationship?
So you're really talking about a lot of self-reflection and the ability of the parent to look inside themselves and go, wait a minute, how would I feel in this situation? I'm strong-willed, and what would I want somebody to do? Let's talk about what kids really need. And I think that this comes up a lot in my conversations with parents, because they're, oh, I'm so tired. My kid needs to this, and my kid needs to go here, and my kid needs to, be in the orchestra and so forth. But we know that it's a lot deeper than that. So can you talk about the core needs that every child has to be emotionally healthy?
I think you need a close connection with one adult in your life. Hopefully it's one of your parents, or both of your parents, but it could be a grandma or an aunt, whoever you're parenting. You need to have one close connection. That child needs to really feel that they can count on you. And also you need to feel competent, right? I think it's wonderful to join the orchestra, but you can feel competent just helping at home.
Yeah.
I remember in my house growing up, I was the kid who, when we got something from Sears at that time, like a barbecue or something, I put it together. My mom's like, oh, could you put this together? It made me feel really great and special in the house, And so I think building that sense of competency and helping your kids get through what Harvard University, the Center on the Developing Child, calls manageable threats. Kids need to be able to, not have done their homework and get to school and manage the situation. Figure out what to say to the teacher, and that's going to help them then make better choices. If the parent's fixing everything all the time, the child, isn't going to feel competent again. And so there's a lot of extras in our lives now in the United States that it's just amazing and wonderful to build these, special skills, I guess I'll call them. But honestly, you can live on a farm and become a really wonderful human being.
Of course. Yep. And learn.
For parents to imagine that their child will be in a stressful situation and know that maybe if I help, I can help them avoid that experience, right? And so we want to make mindful, reflective choices about that, right? It's actually good and important for, as Sarah was saying, for our children to experience mild levels of stress. That's how they grow. That's how they learn. That's how they figure out problem-solving skills. That's how they actually learn to feel uncomfortable feelings in their body, which is a really important thing for them to experience in terms of building self-regulation, right? They have to know, oh, wow, this is an uncomfortable feeling and I'm tolerating it and I'm dealing with it, and look at it, it's getting smaller and now I feel better again, right? So they need to be able to feel that in order to build self-regulation capacity. And so for parents, we have to lean out sometimes, right? And just observe and not step in when they're struggling with XYZ thing, right? You talk about, right, like during the busyness of the school week, if you're helping your kid with getting their shoes on and their backpack packed and all that, that's okay, right? If we're trying to get out the door. But on the weekend or another time, let them struggle a little bit with whatever it is that they're trying.
It's hard because if your child is stressed and your child is sitting at school looking at everybody eating their lunch and they don't have one, it's stressful for the parent. And so I think you're absolutely right. To be able to endure your own discomfort helps you teach your kids to endure their discomfort. Now, talk to us a little bit about kids being mean to one another, because we know in classrooms, no matter what age kids are, 8, 10, so forth, they're going to feel left out. They're going to feel hurt by another child, particularly girls and girls. I was left out of the sleepover, or so-and-so didn't invite me to the party. How do you help kids deal with stresses like that? Because those are the stresses that'll really get moms upset. And I've heard moms say, I'm just going to call that girl's mother. I say, you really can't do that. But how do you help kids deal with stresses like that?
The first thing I would say is for the kids to have the message that it's such a good idea to talk about that, right? And so if a child was bringing that up to a parent, or my daughter bringing that up to me at home, I'd say, I'm really happy we're talking about this. This is such an important thing that we're discussing, because you really want to give them the message that whatever you're going through, you don't have to endure it alone. You have a safe place. So I think that's almost more important than solving the problem at school, is like, this is when you seek help, right? And this is a good thing that you're actually speaking up. And then, and then you can be empathic about it, and you can help talk it through with the child about, what's in their best interests, right? How do they want to express themselves? How do they want to deal with the situation, get their ideas? You might want to do a little role playing, with your child to help them feel more empowered. So those are the main things that I would say. And I do agree that, right, like, oh, let's change the classroom, or let's make sure, you never see this child again, right? Like, that's just not happening in the real world. You're going to have to encounter people that are tough to deal with. And so I think there's always like an extreme situation where, you would use that level of intervention, but most of the time, think it through. You could absolutely handle it on the adult level with the teacher or the other adults that are involved, in terms of getting more observations and coming together as an adult team, to try to address the situation. Those are the thoughts that I have.
I remember recently my granddaughter, this happened to her. She's 11, and she was invited to go to a sleepover with a friend, and then the friend changed her mind and wanted to invite somebody else. And it really hurt my granddaughter. And as soon as she told me, I thought, I can't believe it. I'm going to call that mother up. But I didn't. And I said, oh, must be really disappointing. And she said, and I said, that kind of thing used to happen to me when I was young as well.
Beautiful.
But I was literally trying to be very intentional about how I responded and how I had to act against my grandparenting instincts, which was just to call somebody screamer. But you can't do that. Talk about emotional wounds. You talk about helping kids heal from emotional wounds. What are the most common types of emotional wounds that you see kids enduring?
The biggest wounds come from kids who didn't have good early caregiving, right? So that's, but most of your listeners, I imagine, are caring for their own children. And then, so they're going to have a good relationship. But I think, I think all kids feel lonely sometimes. Loneliness is a really, like your granddaughter even being left out of something. You feel left out, and that to me drives a lot of unhappiness or even bullying behavior towards other kids, because kids feel lonely. And I think, so all the things that we're talking about today is connecting with your child. What all the parenting research shows, that really an effective approach is making sure your child feels understood and accepted. Right. And that is sort of the opposite of emotional wounds. Like, bad things are going to happen to all of us, and but with you, like with your granddaughter, you helped her work through that. So now she has a little template. for next time, something doesn't go her way.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'd add, because we work with adults too, and I've worked with a lot of adults who've had trauma in their childhoods. One of the things that we hear a lot about are not being able to express authentic feelings, being shamed for feeling sad or mad, or boys don't cry, or even joyful, right? Not being able to be expressively, outwardly happy and joyful can really be wounding, can really shut down people's access to their authentic feeling states and their ability to connect intimately in intimate relationships. So, that's something I would always consider in terms of acceptance. All of you, we love all parts of you and all of who you are. And not any part of you needs to shift or change because I'm uncomfortable with it,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
Because I think kids can feel wounded when they're not accepted by the
Yeah.
people that are closest to them.
Right. Now, talk about, if you would, those, the years before 5, or the years when kids are 1 or 2, whatever. A lot of parents can't be with their kids as much as they want, and they go to daycare, or maybe you've got one parent whose job takes them away for weeks at a time, and another parent who's still working. Um, do kids, when you say that kids are well cared for during those early years, I think a lot of parents are a little confused as to what does good care look like, and how do I know I'm doing enough of it with my 2-year-old when they don't really communicate that much with me? How do you know that the caregivers are really doing a good enough job? I guess what I'm saying is, what kind of needs do kids have in those early years that and can a caregiver other than a parent give them meet those needs? And are they different than if a parent does it?
Right. I'd just say, I think, humans are very adaptable, right?
Mhm.
We are used to having our parents take care of us, and then other people in our community. So I think, you have to keep that in mind. And when I'm saying poor early care, I mean like abuse and neglect,
Okay.
living in an orphanage or things like that. So I appreciate you clarifying that. But I think
Mhm.
hopefully you wanted to maybe add something.
Yeah, I think you're talking about like kind of secure attachment, but I think you're right. Sarah, that's a great point about human beings being adaptable. For parents who work a lot, travel a lot of times we've heard both of us together have heard parents say like, I'm hurting. Like this hurts to be separated from my child so much, or it's bothering me, or, I just feel like we haven't connected. I think that's a really good time to say, you know what, it's okay if you're missing half a day of school tomorrow, or I'm going to skip the meeting and instead spend the hour, even
Mhm.
the hour, with my child to fill us up again and nourish our relationship. So when you feel that kind of angst
Mhm.
inside as a parent, like, oof, this hurts. There's been a lot of separate. That's a really good sign to say, you know what, as soon as possible, I'm going to prioritize, even if it's literally, we'll even say half an hour
Yeah.
of unstructured, just focused presence with my kid to
Mhm.
support our connection. And that can make a really big difference.
The reason I ask is because there are a lot of mothers, particularly younger mothers, who are, with this guilt thing, trying to struggle with, okay, how much is enough time? And if my child is with a daycare person, even if it's a really nice person, 8 hours a day, and then I'm home with them in the night, how do I know if they're going to attach to her, attach to me? There's this real tension that moms live with about, how much time away is okay and how much time is not okay, because they read about attachment. Um, so can a young child, we'll go back to the 2-year-old, make good attachments with the parents and also attachments with a caregiver? Does attaching to one person take away from attachment with another person?
No, and actually, most attachment is formed in your very early time before 2 years old. By then, I mean, they do studies where they look at the relationship between a parent and an infant at 4 months old, and they can see what the attachment type, I guess, is, or pattern is going to be going forward. But what I always love to say to parents who especially adopt very traumatized children, this is true for any parent, attachment styles can even change in adults. You know, we actually, it takes a lot of work. This is the work Kahlila is talking about with her adult clients. You know, we can adapt and learn to trust somebody. And if one person is changing what they're doing, or you can find it in a new person to attach to. So actually humans are made, we have the capacity to attach to many people, but you need one consistent person. So if you're the mom, you know, I remember my sister and I was saying, oh, you're still, you know, sleeping with your child or something. And she's saying, you know, I'm at work all day. This cozy time for me, it's like, it's really important. Yeah, that was a great answer, you know?
Yeah.
I agree. And I've had a number of working parents say, you know, my child is 4 and they still, or 3, and they still sleep in my bed. Is that okay? And I said, what do you think? And they say, well, I think it's okay. Then it's okay. You know, because I don't think we don't need to parent in a box and say, okay, your child needs to stay in his bed after 2 or once he's in his crib. You know, there are a lot of ways to do it well. And I think that if it's appropriate and healthy and the parent, that's more time that they get with their child, you know, good for them. Well, there are so many topics that I've thought about as we've been going through our time together that I'd love to do a whole show on, because I think of a lot of the patients that I have and you know, parents needing help because a lot of kids, you know, have real attachment issues, particularly if they're adopted older. And even kids have attachment issues from their, you know, if they weren't adopted.
Yeah.
So that's a whole nother show.
Yeah.
My guests have been Dr. Kahlila Robinson and Sarah Gerstenzang. I thank you so much for coming. This has been so wonderful. I want you to quickly say the name of your workbook again and where people can find out more of each of you and the great work you're doing.
Sure. Our workbook is called the Self-Regulation Workbook for Children ages 5 through 8.
Yeah, and we just really appreciate this conversation today. Thank you so much. It's been really interesting and engaging, and I want to say hello to all the people who are listening, and I hope you heard something useful.
Yes. Thank you so much for having us.
You know, many professionals invest in an executive coach for personal development and a trainer for physical fitness. Now you can hire me, a best-selling author and expert coach, to help you raise great kids. I've over 35 years practicing pediatrics and an extensive experience decoding what your kids need and think about you. I've helped countless parents just like you. You can talk directly with me through private or group coaching. I'll listen and provide a customized plan to help you be the best dad you can be. Sign up now through the link in the episode notes. Your kids are counting on you. Let's make your family's future brighter together.